The night lay thick and heavy over the city, muffled in a haze of exhaust fumes and neon glow that stretched and shimmered across the wet streets. The buildings loomed over narrow alleyways like silent giants, and the hum of traffic echoed, adding a pulse to the atmosphere. Sam moved through the shadowed paths of the city as if they were an extension of himself, his hands tucked into his worn jacket, shoulders hunched against the chill. To him, these streets were familiar and predictable, sharp corners, hidden doorways, and an unspoken rhythm that divided the cautious from the careless. He knew when to stay hidden, when to show his face, and tonight, he was keeping to the shadows. As he rounded a corner, Sam's instincts kicked in. Ahead, he saw a man stumbling into an alley, his sharp suit and confident gait making him look as out of place as a diamond in the gutter. The man was glancing over his shoulder, his steps quickening, but Sam's trained eye caught the menace following him, two figures trailing, their postures screaming trouble. Sam knew scenes like this. They were part of the city's undercurrent, the ugly part most people never wanted to know. For a moment, he thought about walking away, avoiding the confrontation. But something held him back. The stranger's panicked glances, the tightness in his posture. It sparked a flicker of recognition, a feeling Sam tried to ignore. Maybe he felt a kindred sense of vulnerability, or maybe it was just the pull of instinct. He cleared his throat loudly, stepping into view. "Hey, what's going on here?" The two men turned, sneering at Sam, sizing him up with dismissive glances. Sam, though a kid, held his ground. He wasn't big, but his expression was cold and steady, his gaze sharp, like someone who had survived worse than what these two had to offer. After a tense moment, the men backed off, their muttered threats fading as they slinked into the shadows. The stranger let out a shaky breath, looking at Sam in shock. "Thank you. I didn't know what they were going to do," he stammered, his voice still tight with fear. Sam shrugged, trying to brush it off. But as he looked closer at the man, recognition hit him. This wasn't just any random guy. He'd seen that face before, maybe on a movie poster or on the side of a bus. It dawned on him that he was standing face to face with a celebrity. The man seemed to recover, patting his pockets and pulling out a sleek wallet. "Here, let me pay you back for stepping in." Sam raised his hand. "Keep it." A pause settled between them, but an idea sparked in Sam's mind. A bold, absurd idea that he hadn't let himself consider until now. He knew asking for money wasn't the answer. Money wasn't what he needed. "Well," he started, glancing away briefly, then looking back with a hint of defiance. "Actually, there's something else." The man's brows lifted, his curiosity piqued. "What's that?" "Pretend to be my older brother." Sam's voice held a mixture of seriousness and a hint of playfulness, like he was challenging himself to see if he'd actually go through with it. The absurdity of a request made him hesitate, but he kept his gaze steady, watching the stranger's reaction. The man stared at him, brow furrowing as he processed the odd request. "Your brother." He seemed taken aback, but his gaze softened. He extended his hand, and as Sam took it, he introduced himself with a slight smile. "I'm Ethan." "All right, brother. Let's see what this is all about." Ethan's decision had surprised him almost as much as it did Sam. He'd expected the kid to ask for cash, maybe a meal, but an arrangement to act as his older brother. It intrigued him. Leading Sam through the city streets toward his high-rise, Ethan felt a strange sense of curiosity and protectiveness growing within him. Sam walked beside him, his expression wary but excited, his gaze flitting over the buildings that towered above them. He tried to keep his expression casual, though the glittering world around him was both intimidating and alluring. "Where are we going?" he asked, trying to sound indifferent. "I've got an event tonight," Ethan explained, glancing down at him. "You don't mind a crowd, do you?" Sam shrugged, his eyes widening a little as they approached a luxurious building with a glassy exterior that glistened under the streetlights. His excitement was tinged with unease, and he tugged at the collar of his worn jacket, painfully aware of his thrift store clothes. The lobby was pristine, with polished marble floors and sleek decor. Sam felt like every step he took left a mark, his boots squeaking on the spotless tiles. He noticed people glancing at him as they passed, their expressions a mix of confusion and disinterest. He tried to ignore it, focusing on keeping up with Ethan's long strides. They reached the penthouse level, where Ethan's apartment sprawled with an understated elegance. The walls were adorned with modern art, and the furniture was minimalist, all clean lines and muted tones. A massive window stretched across one wall, offering a breathtaking view of the city skyline, its lights twinkling like stars against the dark canvas of the night. Sam tried to keep his cool. "Nice place," he mumbled, glancing around with barely concealed awe. Ethan chuckled. "Thanks. Always felt a bit too big for just me." Before Sam could respond, a sharp knock echoed through the apartment. Ethan opened the door, and a woman entered, her presence exuding a cool, professional air. Dressed in a tailored suit, her gaze fell on Sam, and her brows lifted slightly in surprise. "Ethan," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "Who's your guest?" "This is Sam," Ethan replied, his tone casual yet firm. "He's family." Sam's eyes darted to Ethan, surprised by how naturally he used the word family. It had been a long time since Sam had felt that, and he barely managed to contain his reaction. Grace, however, didn't hide her skepticism, her gaze shifting back to Ethan with a question in her eyes. "Well, we're on a schedule," she said, directing her attention back to Ethan, but clearly uncomfortable with Sam's presence. The event turned out to be a glamorous charity gala, a whirlwind of flashing cameras, designer dresses, and sparkling champagne flutes. Ethan's world felt surreal to Sam, a place filled with people who moved with a practiced ease, like they belonged nowhere else. Sam felt a rush of excitement mingling with unease, his worn clothes making him stand out in a sea of polished appearances. He was acutely aware of every stare, every whisper, and Grace's pointed looks didn't help. "You okay?" Ethan asked at one point, noticing Sam's tense posture. Sam nodded, forcing a smile. "Yeah, just a lot to take in." Ethan patted his shoulder, a gesture that felt almost brotherly. Sam tried to cling to that sense of belonging, but he couldn't shake the feeling of being an outsider, especially when he overheard someone murmur to Grace, "Who's the kids?" The night felt endless, and Sam found himself observing Ethan more closely, noting the way people orbited around him, laughing at his jokes, hanging on his every word. It was strange, almost alien to Sam. He realized with a jolt that, despite Ethan's ease in this world, there was a distance in his smile, an edge of detachment that hinted at something deeper. After the event, they returned to the penthouse, the city lights casting a soft glow through the massive windows. They sat in silence for a moment, the only sounds the muffled hum of the city below. "You held up well tonight," Ethan said, breaking the silence. "Those kinds of events aren't easy, even for people used to them." Sam shrugged, brushing off the discomfort he'd felt. "Guess you're used to it by now, huh?" Ethan was quiet for a moment, looking out at the city. "Yeah, but sometimes it feels empty, like none of it really matters." His voice held a note of vulnerability, and Sam felt a flicker of empathy. He realized that maybe Ethan needed this brotherly arrangement as much as he did. As they sat there, two people from vastly different worlds, Sam felt something shift. Perhaps, he thought, he'd found someone who understood what it was like to feel alone, even when surrounded by people. The thought lingered, softening the edges of his usual defenses. Ethan found himself still pondering Sam's request the following morning. Their odd meeting, the chaos of the night before, and the unusual bond that had begun to form were all a lot to digest. But beneath it, he felt an unexpected clarity, a sense that Sam had brought something genuine and grounding into his life. As he sipped his coffee in the quiet of his penthouse, he heard the sound of tentative footsteps. Sam appeared in the doorway, looking hesitant but determined. Ethan couldn't help but smile at the sight. The kid looked out of place, his jeans worn and his gaze restless as it moved over the sleek furniture and modern art. But he was here, and something about that felt right. "Morning," Sam greeted, shuffling to the counter. "Good morning," Ethan replied, handing him a mug. Sam's expression softened as he accepted the warm coffee, savoring it with a content sigh. After a few sips, Sam looked at him. About last night, the whole brother thing. I wasn't just joking. His tone was serious, and Ethan could see a flicker of vulnerability behind his steady gaze. Ethan studied him for a moment, then nodded. You want to keep this going? Sam shifted, clearly wrestling with his words. Look, I don't need money, and I don't need charity. He paused, his voice steady but low. I just want a chance to feel what it's like to have someone who has my back, just for a little while. Ethan's heart sank a little, hearing the longing that Sam tried so hard to mask. His own life had been filled with people wanting something from him, his fame, his attention, his money. But Sam's request was different, and it resonated deeply. All right, Ethan said finally, a softness in his voice. Let's give it a shot. He extended his hand, sealing the agreement with a firm shake. Just one thing, though. Sam looked at him, guarded. Yeah. Honesty, Ethan said. If we're doing this, I need you to be honest with me. No hiding things. If there's something I need to know, you tell me. Deal. A flicker of hesitation crossed Sam's face, but he nodded. Deal. Their arrangement began that day, and Ethan made a genuine effort to include Sam in his daily life. He introduced him to the basics of high society, the events, the etiquette, the subtle expectations that came with mingling among the wealthy and famous. And although Sam acted nonchalant, Ethan noticed the boy's occasional moments of awe, especially when faced with the comforts he had never known. The first major event Sam attended as Ethan's brother was a charity function hosted by one of Ethan's close friends. The venue was a grand ballroom with chandeliers that sparkled like crystal stars, walls draped in elegant fabrics, and the smell of perfume and champagne filling the air. Guests dressed in designer suits and gowns mingled around, each appearing as comfortable as if they'd been born into this world. Sam, on the other hand, tugged uncomfortably at the collar of the jacket Ethan had lent him, glancing around with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. His thrift store clothes might have been replaced for the night, but he still felt like he didn't belong. Just stay close to me, Ethan reassured him with a warm smile. You'll be fine. They entered the event together, and heads turned almost immediately. Whispers passed between the guests, and Sam noticed the speculative glances they threw his way. Grace, who had been discussing something with a few of Ethan's acquaintances, saw him and approached quickly, her eyes narrowing as they landed on Sam. Ethan, she greeted smoothly, then turned to Sam, her tone polite but cold. Sam, isn't it? He nodded, offering a small smile. Grace's gaze was calculating, like she was trying to fit him into a puzzle where he didn't quite belong. It was clear she had her doubts about him. As the evening wore on, Sam began to feel like an exhibit on display. People constantly whispered and threw curious glances his way, and Grace's subtle but obvious disapproval only added to his discomfort. Ethan, sensing Sam's unease, kept him close, introducing him to a few friends who were more welcoming, though their interest seemed mostly polite. At one point, Ethan led him to a quieter corner of the room, away from the crowded center. You doing all right? He asked, a note of concern in his voice. Yeah, it's a lot, Sam admitted, glancing around. He noticed the way people moved with ease, how their laughter seemed effortless, and felt an ache of loneliness. He'd spent so much of his life trying to survive that moments like these, filled with laughter and luxury, felt like another world. You'll get used to it, Ethan assured him. But Sam saw something in Ethan's eyes, a hint of weariness. It dawned on him that even Ethan wasn't entirely at ease here. That night, as they returned to the penthouse, Sam stayed unusually quiet. Ethan could sense the thoughts swirling in the boy's mind, but didn't push. Instead, he simply said, You did well tonight. Sam looked up, surprised. Thanks, he murmured. Then, as if a thought had been gnawing at him, he asked, Why do you even come to these things if you don't like them? Ethan hesitated, then gave a wry smile. I guess it's just expected. Part of the job, you know? But sometimes, it does feel like none of it really matters. His words hung in the air, resonating deeply with Sam. He'd always assumed that the wealthy had everything figured out, that their lives were all glamour and ease. But Ethan's quiet confession shattered that illusion, leaving Sam with a new understanding of his brother. He realized they weren't as different as he'd thought. They were both searching for something real, something that went beyond the appearances and expectations that defined their worlds. As they sat there, looking out at the city lights, the distance between them seemed to shrink, and a fragile bond began to take root, a connection neither of them had anticipated, but that both felt drawn to protect. The days following the charity event brought a new sense of rhythm to Ethan and Sam's lives. Ethan continued including Sam in his world, introducing him to more people and showing him the ropes of high society life. Sam adapted quickly, learning how to speak in measured tones, navigate conversations, and blend in just enough to avoid suspicion. But despite his efforts, he still felt like an outsider, especially under the critical eyes of people like Grace. It was a rainy afternoon when Ethan invited Sam to another event, this time a more intimate charity gathering at a downtown art gallery. The venue was smaller and quieter, the type of place where people spoke in hushed tones, examining paintings as if they held the answers to life's mysteries. Ethan explained that this event was for an organization helping at-risk youth, something he supported but seldom spoke about publicly. Sam felt more at ease here, recognizing the kids in the photographs on display as reflections of himself, people who had grown up without support or stability. As he walked past the photos, a quiet sense of kinship settled in his chest. "You relate to this?" Ethan asked, noticing the look on Sam's face. Sam nodded. "It's hard not to. I used to be one of them." His voice was soft, but Ethan heard the weight in it. For a moment, he saw a glimpse of a life Sam had lived, a life Ethan could barely imagine. The gallery owner approached, smiling as she recognized Ethan. Sam stepped back, watching as Ethan engaged in polite conversation, his demeanor shifting effortlessly into that of the polished celebrity. Sam admired his ability to blend in, to adapt to any environment with ease. It was something Sam hadn't quite mastered yet. Grace arrived shortly after, her gaze quickly zeroing in on Sam. She approached him with her usual guarded expression, her voice as smooth as ever. "Enjoying the event?" Sam hesitated. "Yeah. It's interesting," he replied, unsure of how much to say. Grace's eyes narrowed slightly. "This isn't just a social gathering, you know. People here take these causes seriously. They contribute because they believe in it." Her tone carried an edge of challenge, as if daring him to prove he was more than a curious bystander. Sam swallowed, feeling the familiar weight of scrutiny. He didn't respond, choosing instead to focus on the photos, letting Grace's words simmer in his mind. She walked away, leaving him with a lingering sense of doubt and frustration. Later, as they were leaving, Ethan noticed Sam's silence and gave him a questioning look. "You okay?" Sam forced a smile, brushing off the encounter. "Yeah, just thinking." But as they walked home, the weight of Grace's words stayed with him. It felt like a test, a silent challenge to prove his worth in a world where he didn't quite belong. The days turned into weeks, and Sam found himself becoming more accustomed to Ethan's world. He started to recognize faces at events, remember names, and even anticipate the types of conversations people like to have. But no matter how well he adapted, he knew he was still an outsider, a fact Grace subtly reminded him of at every opportunity. One evening, Ethan and Sam returned from a long day out, only to find Grace waiting in Ethan's penthouse. Her expression was unusually serious, her lips pressed into a tight line as she watched Sam. Sam felt a prickle of anxiety, sensing that something was off. "Ethan," she began, her tone clipped. "We need to talk, privately." Ethan glanced at Sam, then back at Grace. "Whatever you have to say, you can say it in front of Sam." Grace's eyes flickered, a brief hesitation crossing her face before she composed herself. "Very well," she said, pulling out a folder from her bag. "I did some digging into Sam's background. You said you wanted honesty, so here it is." The words hung in the air like a threat, and Sam's stomach twisted as he realized what was happening. He looked at Ethan, whose expression was unreadable, caught between trust in Grace and loyalty to Sam. Grace opened the folder, her voice cold and detached as she began listing off details of Sam's past. A petty theft charge, a night spent in a juvenile detention center, a record of vagrancy. Each fact was like a small knife, carving away at the fragile trust he had built with Ethan. "I just thought you should know," Grace finished, closing the folder with a quiet snap. "You wanted transparency, Ethan. This is what it looks like." Ethan was silent, his gaze shifting between Grace and Sam. Finally, he spoke, his voice calm but laced with frustration. "Sam, is this true?" Sam felt his face flush with shame, his heart pounding. "Yeah, it's true." He looked down, feeling the weight of his past pressing down on him. I didn't want you to know. I thought if you knew, you'd think differently of you." Ethan finished, his tone softening. Sam nodded, unable to meet his gaze. Ethan took a deep breath, his gaze steady. "Everyone has a past, Sam. I'm not going to judge you for surviving the best way you knew how." He shot a pointed look at Grace, his voice firm. "And I'm not interested in digging up dirt on people I trust." Grace's expression hardened, but she said nothing. She left shortly after, leaving a tension-filled silence in her wake. Once they were alone, Ethan looked at Sam, his expression thoughtful. "You should have told me, you know?" Sam nodded, the shame still lingering. "I know? I didn't want you to see me like that." Ethan's gaze softened. "Sam, I don't care about your past. What matters to me is the person you are now. You've proven yourself, and that's enough for me." Sam's throat tightened, a strange warmth spreading in his chest. It had been a long time since someone had believed in him, and the feeling was both comforting and terrifying. He didn't know how to respond, so he simply nodded, a silent understanding passing between them. But as he lay awake that night, Sam couldn't shake the feeling that his past would always be a shadow, lurking behind him, ready to ruin any chance he had at a new life. The doubt crept in, gnawing at him, reminding him of every mistake, every wrong turn. And for the first time, he found himself wondering if maybe, just maybe, he could rewrite his story, not erase it, but find a way to make peace with it. Ethan, too, lay awake, contemplating the boundaries of trust and the extent of Grace's influence. He knew he'd have to confront her eventually, but tonight, his thoughts remained on Sam and the quiet but fierce determination he'd seen in his eyes. Ethan felt something in himself shift, a new resolve taking root. He would stand by Sam, even if it meant facing the disapproval of those closest to him. Together, they'd face whatever challenges came their way. And maybe, just maybe, they'd prove to each other that family wasn't just a matter of blood, but of choice. The quiet that settled after Grace's revelation was short-lived. A few days later, Ethan and Sam stepped out for lunch, only to be greeted by a group of reporters hovering by the entrance to Ethan's building. Flashbulbs burst, and a series of sharp, intrusive questions were thrown their way. "Ethan, who's the kid? Is this your brother? An adopted son, maybe? Are the rumors true about his criminal past?" Sam's face paled, and he instinctively moved closer to Ethan. Ethan, unfazed, put a protective hand on Sam's shoulder, ignoring the barrage of questions as they navigated their way to the waiting car. But Sam could feel the words digging in, each one a reminder of the shadows that clung to him, threatening to pull him back. Inside the car, Sam's hands trembled as he clasped them together, staring at the floor. "Guess they found out about, my past." Ethan sighed, his gaze softening. "It's just gossip. They'll find something else to talk about soon enough." But Sam wasn't convinced. The shame he thought he'd buried resurfaced, stirring a fear he'd tried to suppress. What if his presence tarnished Ethan's reputation? What if people began to see him as nothing more than a stain on Ethan's polished image? As the days passed, the whispers grew louder, and Sam's anxiety festered. At one point, he overheard two staff members in Ethan's building whispering about him, their words stinging like fresh wounds. "Did you hear about that kid staying with Ethan?" "Yeah, heard he's got a record." "What's Ethan thinking?" That night, Sam paced the penthouse, his mind swirling with doubt. He knew he was jeopardizing Ethan's carefully curated image, and guilt gnawed at him. He wondered if maybe it was time to walk away, to save Ethan from the scrutiny that came with his presence. But as he considered leaving, Ethan appeared in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "You okay?" he asked gently, sensing the turmoil Sam was trying to hide. Sam hesitated, then looked up, his voice barely a whisper. Maybe I should go. I don't want to ruin things for you." Ethan's eyes softened, and he crossed the room, placing a firm hand on Sam's shoulder. "Listen to me," he said, his voice steady. "You're not going anywhere. Family sticks together, even when things get tough. I don't care what people say. I care about you." The words hung in the air, wrapping around Sam like a blanket. For the first time in a long time, he felt the warmth of acceptance, the reassurance that he wasn't alone. And as he looked up at Ethan, he realized that maybe, just maybe, he belonged here. Despite Ethan's reassurances, Sam couldn't shake the feeling that he was a burden. The media scrutiny only intensified, and each headline seemed sharper than the last. Rumors spread about Ethan's connection to a troubled youth, and the whispers among his social circle grew louder, fueled by Grace's ongoing disapproval. One evening, after Ethan had gone to an event, Sam sat alone in the penthouse, the silence pressing in on him. He stared out at the city below, his reflection in the glass a reminder of how different he was from this world of wealth and glamour. The headlines replayed in his mind, each one casting a shadow over his hopes for a new life. Sam decided it was time. He couldn't keep dragging Ethan into his mess. Quietly, he packed a small bag, slipping out of the apartment and into the city night. The air was cold, biting at his skin as he navigated the familiar streets, his mind clouded with regret and frustration. The city, once his haven, now felt foreign, its noise and chaos amplifying his loneliness. Meanwhile, Ethan returned home, expecting to find Sam in his usual spot on the couch. But the penthouse was empty, and a sense of dread settled over him as he realized what had happened. He searched the apartment, calling Sam's name, his worry intensifying with each unanswered call. In a moment of desperation, Ethan reached out to Grace, explaining the situation with barely concealed panic. But Grace's response was calm, almost dismissive. "Maybe it's for the best," she said. "The kid's background is a risk, Ethan. You're a public figure. You have to protect your image." Ethan's frustration flared. "This isn't about image, Grace. It's about family." Her silence was heavy, and Ethan realized he couldn't rely on her support. He ended the call, his mind racing. Determined, he grabbed his coat and headed out, vowing not to stop until he found Sam. Sam, meanwhile, wandered through the city, his mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. He thought about the nights he'd spent alone, finding solace in dark alleyways and empty storefronts. But now, those same streets felt empty, devoid of the warmth he'd found with Ethan. He realized that leaving wasn't as simple as it once was. He'd left a part of himself back at the penthouse, a piece he wasn't sure he could reclaim. As he walked, lost in thought, a familiar voice called out, "Sam." He turned, and there was Ethan, breathless and worried, his eyes scanning the street until they landed on him. Relief washed over Ethan's face, and he approached, his expression a mixture of anger and concern. "What were you thinking?" Ethan demanded, his voice rough. "You can't just leave like that." Sam looked away, shame prickling his skin. I thought I was doing you a favor." Ethan's expression softened, and he placed a hand on Sam's shoulder, squeezing it gently. "You're not a burden, Sam. You're family. And family doesn't just leave." The words struck something deep within Sam, and for a moment, he felt the weight of his doubts lift, replaced by a quiet sense of belonging. He nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat, and allowed Ethan to guide him back home. The atmosphere in the penthouse shifted after Sam's attempted departure. Ethan's worry turned to resolve, and he became even more protective, going out of his way to make sure Sam felt safe and valued. They spent more time together, sharing meals, stories, and glimpses into their pasts. Slowly, Sam began to let his guard down, revealing fragments of the life he had fought so hard to survive. Despite Ethan's reassurances, though, Sam remained wary, his thoughts drifting back to the constant whispers, the watchful eyes, and the burden he feared he was becoming. He hadn't told Ethan everything, not by a long shot, and he worried that if Ethan knew just how deeply his past was etched into him, he'd be less willing to stand by his side. One afternoon, Ethan surprised Sam with tickets to a community event that raised funds for struggling families and at-risk youth. It wasn't the usual high-profile charity function, but rather an informal gathering at a local park, organized by people who genuinely wanted to make a difference. The event felt more like a neighborhood fair, with games, music, and the scent of food drifting through the air. "Thought we could spend the day here," Ethan said, a gentle smile on his face. "It's a bit more down to earth, yeah." Sam nodded, a tentative smile tugging at his lips. As they wandered through the event, he felt an unusual sense of ease. The people here were different. There were no expensive suits, no scrutinizing eyes, just families enjoying a day out. He even found himself laughing as he played a carnival game with Ethan, the two of them competing with a playful rivalry. But as the afternoon wore on, Sam noticed a familiar face in the crowd, a boy he knew from his past life on the streets. The boy's name was Joel, and though they hadn't been close, they'd shared the same rough journey. Joel approached him, his expression a mix of surprise and curiosity. "Sam, that you?" Joel's voice was filled with disbelief as he looked between Sam and Ethan. Sam shifted uncomfortably, glancing at Ethan, who was watching the exchange with quiet interest. "Hey, Joel," he replied, his voice guarded. Joel's gaze moved between them, a smirk forming on his lips. "Didn't think you'd be hanging out with people like him," he said, nodding toward Ethan. "What happened to sticking it to the rich?" Ethan raised an eyebrow but stayed silent, giving Sam the space to handle the situation. Sam felt a flash of defensiveness, but he kept his tone steady. "Things change, Joel. Not everything's black and white." Joel scoffed, his gaze turning sharp. "So you sold out, huh? Must be nice, living the easy life now." Sam clenched his fists, but before he could respond, Ethan stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "You're right. Sam's life isn't what it used to be, and that's a good thing." The tension in Joel's expression wavered, and after a moment, he mumbled something under his breath and walked away, leaving Sam feeling both relieved and unsettled. Ethan looked at him, his gaze filled with understanding. "You don't owe anyone an explanation for wanting a better life," Ethan said softly. "You deserve this chance as much as anyone." The encounter stayed with Sam as they returned home. For the first time, he felt a sense of pride, not for surviving his past, but for choosing to build something better. Ethan's unwavering support gave him the courage to finally let go of the guilt and start embracing the life he was creating. As the days passed, Sam's relationship with Ethan continued to deepen. They fell into a rhythm, a natural give and take that brought them closer together. Ethan began to open up about his own struggles, the pressure of fame, the loneliness that often accompanied success, and the relentless demand to live up to expectations that sometimes felt impossible. Sam listened intently, his respect for Ethan growing as he saw beyond the polished exterior to the man beneath. He realized that Ethan's life wasn't as perfect as it seemed, that he too carried scars, albeit of a different kind. One afternoon, Ethan invited Sam to join him at a volunteer project he'd started, a mentorship program for young people in the city. The program offered guidance and resources for teens struggling to find their way, much like Sam had. The community center was filled with kids of all ages, some engaged in tutoring sessions, others playing sports, and a few huddled in small groups, deep in conversation with mentors. Ethan introduced Sam to the program director, a kind woman named Mrs. Harlow, who welcomed him warmly. "Ethan's told us so much about you," she said, her smile genuine. "I think you'll fit in just fine here." Sam felt a mix of pride and nerves, grateful that Ethan thought enough of him to make this introduction. As he got involved, he found himself naturally connecting with some of the kids, offering advice that stemmed from his own experiences. He was surprised by how fulfilling it felt to be seen as a role model, someone who could give back rather than just survive. After a few hours, Sam found himself chatting with a teenager named Miles, who reminded him of himself at that age, angry, suspicious, and constantly on guard. Miles asked questions about life on the streets, his curiosity tinged with bitterness, and Sam answered honestly, sharing both the harsh realities and the hard-won lessons. "Didn't think anyone like you would understand," Miles muttered, his gaze a mix of distrust and intrigue. Sam nodded, understanding the skepticism. "I get it, but people like Ethan, they're out there. You just gotta let them in." By the end of the day, Sam felt a sense of purpose he hadn't experienced before. He'd always thought of himself as someone who took what he could get, but now he was giving, even guiding, and the feeling was intoxicating. He realized that he wanted more of this, to build a life that wasn't just about survival, but about making a difference. That evening, as he and Ethan walked home, Sam spoke up, his voice hesitant but determined. "I think I want to keep doing this, the mentorship thing." Ethan's face lit up with pride. "I was hoping you'd say that. I think you'd be great at it." Sam's confidence grew, bolstered by Ethan's belief in him. For the first time, he could envision a future that wasn't limited to the narrow, harsh survival he'd known. There was a new world opening up for him, one filled with possibilities, connections, and perhaps a place to call home. As they reached the penthouse, Ethan clapped Sam on the back, his gaze filled with warmth. "You know, you've come a long way. I'm proud of you." Sam's throat tightened, and he managed a small smile. "Thanks. I think I'm starting to be proud of myself, too." Their journey together had begun as a simple request, a moment of impulse in a dark alley. But now it was so much more. They weren't just strangers bound by chance. They were family, each helping the other find a purpose and a place in a world that had once felt unforgiving. Ethan's life continued to evolve as Sam became a more integral part of it. But as they grew closer, Grace's disapproval grew louder, her skepticism evident in every interaction. One evening, as Ethan prepared for another charity event, Grace arrived at the penthouse, her face set in a grim expression. "Ethan, we need to talk, seriously," she insisted, her gaze flicking briefly toward Sam, who was sitting nearby. "I think it's time we discuss the impact this arrangement is having on your reputation." Ethan set down his glass, exasperated. "We've talked about this, Grace. Sam is family. I'm not letting him go just because it's inconvenient for some people." Grace sighed, her patience visibly wearing thin. "Ethan, this isn't just about convenience. People are starting to question your judgment. The media is picking up on his past, and donors are becoming wary. I'm not asking you to abandon him. I'm asking you to consider the bigger picture here." Sam, listening in, felt a familiar wave of shame and defensiveness wash over him. He hated being the cause of Ethan's troubles, hated being reminded of the past that kept clawing at his heels. Ethan's jaw clenched. "I don't care what they think, Grace. Sam is staying." A silence fell, thick with tension. Grace took a deep breath, pulling a folder from her bag and setting it on the table. "If that's your decision, you deserve to know everything." Ethan's gaze flicked to the folder, a hint of unease in his eyes. "What is this?" "It's everything I found about Sam's past," Grace replied, her tone cautious but firm. "If you want to keep him in your life, you need to understand who you're protecting." Sam's heart sank, a knot of dread twisting in his stomach. He hadn't told Ethan everything. There were things in his past he wasn't proud of, things he'd hoped would stay buried. But now, those secrets were about to come to light, and he feared they would be too much for Ethan to accept. Ethan hesitated, glancing at Sam. But before he could open the folder, Sam stepped forward, his voice tight with emotion. "Ethan, maybe you should know. I didn't want to lie to you, but there's stuff I haven't told you, stuff that's hard to talk about." Ethan nodded, his expression softening. "Then tell me, Sam. Whatever it is, I'm here to listen." Taking a shaky breath, Sam began to reveal the parts of his life he'd kept hidden. The fights, the the petty crimes, the desperate moments that had shaped him. He spoke of nights spent in shelters, times he'd made mistakes just to survive, and the people he'd lost along the way. Each word felt like a weight lifting from his shoulders, yet he couldn't shake the fear of rejection that lingered in the back of his mind. When he finished, he looked down, unable to meet Ethan's gaze. But Ethan placed a hand on his shoulder, his voice steady. "Sam, your past doesn't define you. You've been through more than most people could ever imagine, and you came out stronger. That's what matters to me." Grace watched the exchange in silence, a hint of surprise flickering in her eyes. But Ethan's words didn't change her stance, and as she left, she warned him one last time about the risks. Ethan turned to Sam, his gaze unwavering. "Whatever comes our way, we'll face it together. You're my family, Sam, and I'm not letting anyone take that away." For the first time, Sam felt a true sense of belonging, a sense that his past couldn't destroy the future he was building with Ethan. In the following days, the fallout from Grace's revelation simmered beneath the surface, but it wasn't long before the media caught wind of Sam's troubled past. Headlines filled with speculation and judgment, painting Sam as a dangerous influence on Ethan's life. Gossip articles questioned Ethan's decision to stand by Sam, and the whispers in high society circles grew louder. At first, Ethan ignored the rumors, confident that they would fade with time. But as the backlash intensified, even his closest friends and allies began to question his choices. Sponsors hesitated to support his projects, and event invitations dwindled. It was as if the city had turned against him, all because of his association with Sam. One evening, as they walked home from an errand, they passed a group of people murmuring about them, their voices filled with disdain. "Can you believe he's still keeping that kid around? He's ruining his own reputation. It's sad, really. Someone should tell him he's making a mistake." Sam's face flushed, his heart pounding with a mix of anger and shame. He felt like every step he took brought him further into a world that wanted nothing to do with him, a world that rejected him as if he were a stain on its pristine surface. Back at the penthouse, Sam paced, frustration radiating from him. "Ethan, maybe they're right. I'm just causing trouble for you. This isn't fair." Ethan's expression hardened, a protective glint in his eyes. "I don't care what people say, Sam. They don't know you like I do. You don't have to prove anything to anyone. But it's affecting you," Sam argued, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't want to be the reason people turn their backs on you." Ethan stepped forward, his voice unwavering. "If people are turning their backs, then they were never really there for me in the first place. True family, real friends, they don't walk away when things get tough." Sam's throat tightened, the weight of Ethan's words settling over him like a warm blanket. He had spent so much of his life being pushed away, being told he wasn't good enough. But here was Ethan, standing by him, refusing to let him go despite everything. The following day, Ethan took a stand. He gave a rare, candid interview, addressing the backlash with a calm but firm resolve. "Yes, Sam has a past," he told the interviewer, his voice steady. "But that doesn't define who he is today. He's my family, and I'm proud of the person he's becoming." The words resonated deeply, and while some critics continued to whisper, others began to see Ethan's loyalty as a testament to his character. People who had once judged Sam softened their stances, and those who had doubted Ethan's choices found themselves admiring his commitment. For Sam, the interview was more than just a defense. It was a promise, a declaration that he was worth fighting for. And as he watched Ethan speak with such conviction, he felt the first real glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, he could build a future unshackled from his past. That night, as they sat together in the penthouse, Sam turned to Ethan, his voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you for everything. I don't know if I deserve it, but thank you." Ethan gave him a reassuring smile. "Family doesn't have to be perfect, Sam. It just has to be there." The words filled the room, carrying a warmth that chased away the shadows of doubt and fear. For the first time, Sam allowed himself to believe that he could be part of something real, something lasting. And in that moment, he knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, he wouldn't face them alone. As the dust settled from Ethan's interview, An unexpected shift began to take place. People who had initially doubted his decision to stand by Sam started reaching out, expressing admiration for his loyalty and commitment. Supportive messages poured in from fans, some sharing stories of their own struggles and the second chances they'd been given. For the first time, the public narrative surrounding Sam's presence in Ethan's life was starting to change. Even within Ethan's inner circle, there were those who softened their stance. A few close friends approached Ethan, offering their support and recognizing the bond he shared with Sam. Although Grace remained skeptical, others began to see the positive influence Sam had on Ethan, noticing how much more grounded and genuine he seemed since Sam had entered his life. One evening, Ethan invited Sam to a small gathering with a few of these close friends. The setting was far less formal than the typical high society events, held in the cozy ambience of a friend's apartment. The guests were a handful of people Ethan trusted, ones who knew him beyond his public image and fame. At first, Sam felt out of place, standing in the corner and nursing a glass of soda, watching as Ethan mingled effortlessly with the small group. He still felt the lingering fear of judgment, afraid that any wrong move might ruin the fragile acceptance he'd begun to feel. But then, one of Ethan's friends, a woman named Claire, approached him with a warm smile. "You must be Sam," she said, extending her hand. "Ethan's told us a lot about you." Sam shifted awkwardly, glancing at Ethan, who nodded encouragingly. "All good things, I hope," he replied, managing a small smile. Claire chuckled. "Nothing but the best. He really cares about you, you know. And I think it's wonderful, the connection you two have." Her words eased some of his tension, and soon he found himself more at ease, joining conversations and even laughing along with the others. For the first time in a social setting, he felt like he belonged, not as an outsider or a guest, but as part of a family of sorts, a family that accepted him as he was. As the evening wound down, Ethan caught his eye, giving him a nod of approval. Sam felt a surge of pride, realizing that he wasn't just a tag-along in Ethan's life. He was someone worth knowing, someone who mattered to the people around him. It was a feeling he hadn't known he could experience, and it gave him a renewed sense of purpose. Leaving the gathering, he and Ethan walked home in comfortable silence, the quiet night air filled with an unspoken understanding between them. Sam felt like he was finally stepping into a life that felt real, a life where he wasn't constantly looking over his shoulder or hiding who he was. But even with newfound allies, he knew he couldn't ignore the shadows of his past forever. There was still a part of him that feared it could all unravel, that his old life might come back to haunt him. And as much as he wanted to believe in this new life, he couldn't shake the feeling that it was all too good to be true. The weeks that followed felt like a dream to Sam. He was finally finding his footing, learning to trust not only Ethan, but himself. He spent more time at the mentorship program, helping young people who reminded him of his younger self. Each day felt like a step toward a brighter future, one where he wasn't defined by the mistakes of his past. But just as he started to feel secure, an opportunity arose that threatened to tear him away from everything he'd built. Mrs. Harlow, the director of the mentorship program, approached him one afternoon with a bittersweet smile. "Sam, I've been so impressed with your work here," she began, her voice filled with genuine warmth. "I think you have a real gift for connecting with these kids, and I want to offer you something that could help you make a bigger impact." She explained that a nonprofit organization in another city was looking for someone to lead a similar mentorship program. It was a prestigious opportunity, one that would allow Sam to create a lasting impact, but would mean leaving Ethan and the life he'd begun to build. Sam's heart sank as he listened. He knew this was the kind of chance he'd once dreamed of, a chance to make a real difference. But the thought of leaving Ethan, of abandoning the family they'd created together, filled him with a deep sense of dread. Later that evening, he shared the news with Ethan, his voice laced with hesitation. It's a big opportunity," he admitted, forcing a smile. "But I don't know if I'm ready to leave." Ethan's face registered a mix of surprise and pride. "Sam, that's amazing. This is exactly what you've been working toward." He paused, his expression softening. "But I understand if you're not ready. This is your decision, and I'll support you no matter what." Sam nodded, but he felt the weight of the choice pressing down on him. He knew Ethan meant every word, but he also knew that staying might hold him back from reaching his full potential. Leaving, on the other hand, meant risking the family he'd fought so hard to find. For days, he wrestled with the decision, torn between loyalty to Ethan and a desire to forge his own path. He spoke to Mrs. Harlow, who assured him that whatever he chose, his impact would be meaningful. But the choice felt impossible, each option carrying its own sacrifice. Finally, he made his decision. With a heavy heart, he approached Ethan, his voice steady but filled with emotion. I think I have to go," he said, barely able to meet Ethan's gaze. "I don't want to leave, but this is something I need to do." Ethan's expression softened, a mixture of pride and sadness reflected in his eyes. "I understand, Sam, and I'm proud of you for making this choice. You've grown so much, and I know you're going to make a difference." They embraced, the weight of the moment settling between them. For Sam, it was a bittersweet goodbye, a step into the unknown that felt both exhilarating and terrifying. But he knew that no matter where he went, the bond he shared with Ethan would remain, a constant reminder of the family he'd found and the future he was building. As he packed his things, preparing for his new journey, he couldn't help but feel a sense of loss mixed with hope. He was leaving behind a part of himself, but he was carrying forward the lessons, the love, and the belief that he was capable of creating a life worth living. On his last night in the city, they shared a quiet dinner together, both knowing it wouldn't be the end of their story. And as they said their final goodbyes, Sam felt a new sense of purpose taking root within him, a drive to make his mark on the world, just as Ethan had taught him. Sam's departure left a noticeable void in Ethan's life. The penthouse felt strangely empty, its once comforting quiet now amplifying the absence of Sam's laughter, his stories, and the energy he'd brought into Ethan's world. Though Ethan knew he had done the right thing by encouraging Sam to pursue his opportunity, the loss fell raw, leaving him questioning his own choices. Days turned into weeks, and Ethan threw himself into his work, attempting to fill the emptiness. But no amount of film projects, events, or social gatherings could distract him from the ache he felt. In his heart, he knew he missed more than just Sam's presence. He missed a connection they'd built, the family they'd created together. One evening, after a particularly long day on set, Ethan found himself sitting alone in the living room, a half-finished glass of wine in his hand as he stared at the city lights beyond his window. His mind drifted back to the day they'd met, the moment Sam had asked him to be his brother. It had felt surreal then, a strange but intriguing request that had gradually transformed his life. As he sat there, he began to realize that Sam's absence had brought him face to face with his own loneliness. He had friends, colleagues, admirers, but without Sam, his life felt hollow, as if he'd been left with only the surface, with nothing beneath. The nights seemed longer, the city quieter, and he found himself wondering if he'd made a mistake in letting Sam go. In his darkest moments, he considered reaching out, asking Sam to come back, but he stopped himself each time. Sam was building something meaningful, something he'd fought hard to achieve, and Ethan knew he had to respect that. But the loneliness lingered, a constant reminder of the family he'd gained and then lost. It wasn't until he spoke with Claire, one of the friends who had shown kindness to Sam, that he began to see a way forward. She reminded him of the impact he'd had on Sam's life and encouraged him to consider the ways he could continue making a difference, even from afar. "Maybe this is a chance for you to keep doing what you started with Sam," she suggested. "There are more people out there who need the kind of support you offered him." Her words stayed with him, sparking an idea, a glimmer of hope. Perhaps he could honor Sam's journey by expanding his own, by building something that could continue the legacy they'd begun together. Months passed, and Sam's life in the new city flourished. He threw himself into his work with the mentorship program, guiding teenagers who reminded him of his younger self. Each day felt like a small victory, a chance to give back and help others find their way. He'd learned so much from Ethan, and now he was passing those lessons on, creating a ripple effect that filled him with purpose. But even as he settled into his new life, A part of him longed for the connection he'd left behind. He missed Ethan's steady presence, the warmth of their bond, and the feeling of family they'd created together. It wasn't something he could replace, and he often wondered if Ethan felt the same. One evening, while scrolling through social media, Sam came across a post that stopped him in his tracks. It was from Ethan, announcing a new foundation aimed at supporting at-risk youth, much like the program Sam was working with. Ethan's words spoke of giving second chances, of believing in people who'd been overlooked and left behind. As Sam read, a wave of emotion washed over him, knowing that this was Ethan's way of continuing their shared mission. The foundation's launch event was scheduled for the following month, and Sam couldn't ignore the pull he felt to be there, to show Ethan that he hadn't forgotten the family they'd built. He reached out to Mrs. Harlow, who encouraged him to take the time off, understanding the significance of the journey. The night of the event, Sam arrived at the venue with a mixture of excitement and nerves. The setting was elegant yet understated, filled with people who believed in Ethan's vision. As he scanned the crowd, his gaze landed on Ethan, who was in the midst of greeting guests, his face lighting up with a familiar warmth as he connected with each person. Then, as if sensing his presence, Ethan looked up and saw Sam standing across the room. For a moment, everything else seemed to fade, the noise and chatter of the crowd dimming as they locked eyes. Ethan's face broke into a broad smile, his expression filled with a joy Sam hadn't seen before. Without hesitation, Ethan crossed the room, pulling Sam into a tight embrace. "You came," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "I wasn't sure if you'd make it." Sam grinned, the weight of their separation melting away. "I couldn't miss it. This is incredible, Ethan. I'm so proud of you." They spent the evening catching up, sharing stories of the months they'd been apart. Sam told Ethan about the kids he was mentoring, the small victories, and the challenges he'd faced. Ethan, in turn, shared his vision for the foundation, his hopes to expand it into a resource for youth across the country. As the night drew to a close, Ethan and Sam found themselves standing outside, the quiet city lights casting a soft glow around them. They shared a comfortable silence, both realizing how much they'd missed each other, how much their lives had been shaped by the bond they'd formed. "I thought about calling you 100 times, Ethan admitted, his voice filled with sincerity. "But I knew you were building something amazing, and I didn't want to pull you away from it." Sam nodded, his throat tight with emotion. "I thought about coming back, too, but I knew you wanted me to grow, and I needed to prove to myself that I could." Ethan smiled, a hint of pride in his eyes. "You've done more than prove it, Sam. You've created something real, something that's changing lives." They stood together, both knowing that this wasn't an ending, but a new beginning. Their journeys had taken them down different paths, but those paths had ultimately brought them back together, stronger and more connected than before. And as they looked out over the city, they felt a shared sense of purpose, a bond that time and distance could never break. For Sam, this reunion wasn't just a moment of closure. It was a reaffirmation of the family he'd found, the family that would always be there, no matter where life took him. Following the foundation's launch, Ethan and Sam spent several weeks working closely together, each contributing their unique insights to expand the foundation's reach. The renewed sense of purpose revitalized Ethan, giving him a project that felt deeply personal. For Sam, the work reinforced his belief in the power of second chances and the importance of having people who believe in you. The foundation quickly gained momentum, attracting attention from local organizations, philanthropists, and the media. This time, however, the attention wasn't the scandalous gossip of the past, but genuine admiration for Ethan's vision and dedication. News outlets highlighted the foundation's work, and supporters across the country reached out, eager to contribute to the cause. Despite the positive response, there were challenges along the way. The foundation required careful planning, coordination, and a relentless commitment to the mission. Ethan often found himself exhausted by the demands, but Sam's presence provided a constant source of strength. Their dynamic had evolved. Sam was no longer just a younger brother figure, but a true partner, someone who shared Ethan's drive and who could relate to the experiences of the youth they were helping. One day, While attending a community outreach event, they met a young girl named Maya who had been struggling with a difficult home life and had recently run away. She was quiet, guarded, and hesitant to trust anyone, but Sam saw himself in her. He reached out, offering her a supportive ear and sharing his own experiences in a way that made her feel understood. Over the following weeks, Sam became a mentor to Maya, teaching her that her past didn't have to define her. With his guidance, she found the courage to pursue her own dreams and aspirations. Ethan watched the bond grow, proud to see Sam not only embracing his role in the foundation, but also carrying forward a kindness and resilience that had shaped their relationship. Maya's journey became a defining moment for the foundation, a tangible example of the difference they were making. It reminded both Ethan and Sam that their work was more than just a project. It was a lifeline for people who, like them, had been searching for a place to belong. And in helping Maya, they strengthened their commitment to each other and to the mission they shared. As they reflected on the impact they were creating, Ethan felt a profound sense of gratitude for the family they'd built. The work was challenging, and there were still times when he felt the weight of it all. But he knew he wasn't alone. Together, he and Sam were standing up for those who needed a voice, creating a legacy that was more than just a foundation. It was a testament to the power of choosing kindness and family, even when the world seemed against you. As the foundation grew, Ethan and Sam continued to expand their vision. They established partnerships with shelters, educational programs, and mental health resources, building a network of support that reached across the city and beyond. Their success was a reminder of how far they'd come, from strangers in a dark alley to family united by a shared purpose. But even with their accomplishments, they knew that the work wasn't finished. There were always more lives to impact, more young people like Maya who needed a helping hand. And as they moved forward, they remained committed to the idea that every person deserved a chance at a better life, regardless of their past. One evening, as they wrapped up a long day at the foundation's office, Ethan looked at Sam, a sense of pride radiating from him. "We've done something incredible here, Sam," he said, his voice filled with warmth. "I couldn't have done this without you." Sam smiled, the weight of those words sinking in. "I wouldn't be here without you. You showed me that family isn't about where you come from. It's about who stands by you, even when things get tough." They shared a moment of quiet reflection, both recognizing the journey that had brought them here and the challenges they'd overcome together. Ethan knew that their bond would continue to grow, shaped by the lessons they'd learned and the love they'd found in each other. As they left the office and walked through the city streets, they talked about the future, about expanding the foundation, and exploring new ways to support young people in need. The city lights glowed around them, a backdrop to the promise of all they had yet to accomplish. For Sam, the future felt brighter than ever before. He had a purpose, a family, and a place in the world that was uniquely his. And for Ethan, the foundation had given him a legacy that extended beyond fame and fortune, a legacy built on kindness, resilience, and the simple but powerful belief that everyone deserved a second chance. Together, they were moving forward, guided by the bond that had begun in the shadows of a dark alley and grown into a beacon of hope for countless others. Their journey had brought them full circle, proving that family was not something you were born into. It was something you chose, something you built with love, loyalty, and the courage to believe in each other, no matter what. The foundation's impact continued to grow, reaching communities and young people in need across the region. Ethan and Sam's partnership became an example for others, a reminder that compassion and resilience could overcome even the deepest wounds. As their work expanded, they began receiving invitations to speak at events, sharing their story of transformation and the importance of second chances. One evening, as they returned from a speaking engagement, Ethan and Sam discussed the idea of writing a book together, chronicling their journey and the creation of the foundation. They imagined it as a way to inspire others who felt lost or disconnected, offering a message of hope to those searching for belonging. As they brainstormed ideas, Sam felt a sense of pride and fulfillment he had never known before. Here he was, a kid who had once lived on the streets, now building a legacy with someone who had become a brother to him. The thought filled him with gratitude, and he knew that that every step of his journey had been worth it to arrive at this moment. Ethan, too, felt a profound sense of purpose. Through his work with Sam and the Foundation, he had found meaning beyond his career and fame, a mission that mattered. He had built something that would last, something that would continue to touch lives even after they were gone. As they sat together, mapping out the future, they both knew that their work was only beginning. They had dreams of expanding the Foundation nationally, creating a network of support for young people across the country. It was an ambitious vision, but together they were ready to make it a reality. That night, they toasted to the journey ahead, to the family they had built, and to the countless lives they would touch in the years to come. Years passed, and the Foundation grew beyond anything Ethan and Sam had imagined. It became a beacon for at-risk youth and a model for other organizations across the country. Their work inspired a new generation of leaders, each carrying forward the belief that everyone deserved a chance at a better life. Sam took on a more prominent role within the Foundation, becoming a spokesperson and an advocate for the youth they served. His story resonated with people from all walks of life, and he became a voice for those who felt invisible, a testament to the power of resilience and the importance of family. Ethan, too, continued to be involved, but he began to step back, allowing Sam to take the lead. He had built something he was proud of, and now he was ready to watch it flourish under Sam's guidance. One day, during a ceremony honoring the Foundation's 10th anniversary, Sam took the stage to deliver a speech. As he looked out over the audience, he spotted Ethan sitting in the front row, his eyes filled with pride and a quiet, knowing smile. Sam's voice was steady as he spoke, sharing their story and the journey that had brought them here. "Family isn't just about where you come from," he said, his voice carrying a sense of conviction. "It's about who stands by you when you have nothing, who believes in you when no one else will." Ethan was that person for me. He gave me a second chance, and now, together, we're giving that chance to others. The audience erupted into applause, and Sam felt a surge of emotion, knowing that the bond he shared with Ethan had become a symbol of hope and possibility. Their journey had been filled with challenges, but together, they had created something beautiful, something that would live on as a testament to their shared vision. After the ceremony, Ethan and Sam stood together, reflecting on the legacy they had built. They had come so far, from strangers in a dark alley to family standing side by side, united by a mission that had transformed both their lives. As they embraced, Sam whispered, "Thank you for everything." Ethan smiled, his voice filled with warmth. "No, Sam, thank you. You changed my life in ways I never could have imagined." Together, they walked off the stage, ready to face whatever the future held. They knew that their bond would endure, that their story would continue to inspire, and that the family they had chosen would live on, touching lives for generations to come. Years later, Sam found himself sitting in Ethan's penthouse, now his own home, as he prepared for another Foundation event. He glanced around, memories flooding him, the laughter, the quiet moments, the feeling of belonging that Ethan had given him. Ethan had since retired, but his presence remained, woven into the fabric of the Foundation and the lives they'd touched. As Sam prepared to leave, he noticed a small framed photo on the table. It was a picture of him and Ethan from years ago, taken at one of the Foundation's early events. They were both smiling, their faces lit with joy and hope, a snapshot of the family they had built together. Sam smiled, his heart filled with gratitude. He knew that everything he'd accomplished, every life he'd touched, was because of the kindness Ethan had shown him, the belief he'd instilled. Their story was far from over. It was a legacy that would continue, a reminder that family was not defined by blood, but by the bonds forged through love, loyalty, and a shared journey. As he left for the event, Sam felt Ethan's spirit with him, guiding him forward, reminding him that they were family, now and always. Their story lived on, a testament to the power of choosing kindness, of believing in each other, and of creating a family where none had existed before. And as he stepped into the spotlight, ready to carry on the work they'd started together, Sam knew that he was never alone. Ethan's legacy would live on in every life they touched, a lasting bond that would echo through the generations. Hey everyone, if you enjoyed this story, please consider subscribing to the channel and leaving a like. It really helps us out and lets us know you want more content like this. We'd love to hear from you. What part of the story had the biggest impact on you? Was it the character's journey, the theme of chosen family, or maybe the idea of second chances? Let us know in the comments below. Also, we're always looking for new ideas to bring to life. So if there's a story or theme you'd like to see featured on the channel, leave your suggestions in the comments. Your input means a lot, and who knows, your idea could inspire our next story. Thanks for being part of our community, and we'll see you in the next one.